What is the best way for you to talk about some of the things that are happening so that, we're being proactive in solving these problems instead of just kind of like catching the balls as they come?
The Chronic Truth Podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. The views expressed by our guests are their personal opinions and do not constitute medical advice. While we share experiences and strategies related to health, neither the host nor the guest are acting as licensed medical professionals unless explicitly stated. Always consult your physician or qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your treatment plan. Listeners assume all risks associated with implementing any information discussed on this show.
Tonight, I am joined by Lisa Gray, a licensed marriage and family therapist and author who spent years searching for answers before being diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Through both her personal journey and her work with couples facing chronic illness, Lisa helps people learn how to navigate relationships, grief, and resilience when health challenges change your life. Welcome, Lisa. I am so excited about this topic. It's not talked about enough, and I personally know, and personal challenges with chronic health, it does affect relationships. So thank you for being willing to come on and share about this.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about Lisa and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I started out my life as an air traffic controller, and then I switched to counseling, which is an interesting switch. But when I had my kids, the schedule with air traffic just didn't work out. So I went back to school, became a therapist, and I did not think I would be interested in couples work at all. But I fell in love with it, and I just loved working with couples. And so from very early on, I was a couples therapist. That was my specialty. I really specialized in like high conflict and difficult cases. And then I had my second child and I started to not feel well. And of course, as most of your listeners will know, went to the doctor and my labs were fine and everything's fine. And, all these symptoms.
Right.
And, all these symptoms for hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, it's like, well, my joints are always hurting. Yeah, well, you're not 20 anymore, and I'm always tired. So is everyone and all these things. So it took many years. And finally, I did get the diagnosis of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Along with some chronic fatigue. And so that was very helpful to have a framework for what was going on for me. And then the way that the universe kind of works is that all of a sudden, all these couples that were coming to me, one of them had some sort of a chronic illness or chronic illness was playing into some of the problems that they were having. And so then my specialization kind of morphed into couples who were trying to deal with a chronic illness diagnosis. And it's just not something that people have any like sort of references for in our culture. And yet so many of us have chronic illness. So why is there not more information out there about what happens to our relationships when we have chronic illness? Yeah.
And it's so true. Chronic illness, we don't talk about relationships. And, I think it's really valuable. One, you're a licensed counselor, but you're also a therapist. You also have a chronic health condition. So you can relate to those who are struggling. And I'm sure even your personal relationship, you had to learn new ways of communicating, etc.
Yes.
So acceptance and commitment therapy coupled with grief knowledge can help guide a process of learning to cope as couples with how your life has changed. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, when I started working with couples where there's a chronic illness diagnosis, I started thinking, we need some sort of a framework for this. Because what happens is when a chronic illness comes into the picture, grief comes into the picture. I mean, we have lost something. And most of us who have a chronic illness, that makes sense for us. But then we don't really think about how our partners have also lost a lot. They've lost their equal partner or their activities they used to do, or just their perception of how they thought their, relationship would go. And so from the get-go, there's a grieving process happening on both sides. And yet you're grieving kind of different things. And also people grieve differently. So you're probably grieving differently than your partner's grieving. And so you may not recognize right away that there's a grief process going on. So I do think it's helpful, first of all, to frame it as a grieving process, because it's generally easier to have empathy when you know that someone's grieving, that their behavior, their words, their lashing out, whatever might be happening is coming from a place of grief. And so if you can both recognize that, that's a very helpful starting point to understanding what you may both be feeling. And then acceptance and commitment therapy is the idea behind it is that we accept all of our feelings and the reality of our lives. Not saying that it's okay, but just that this is how it is right now. So we're not trying to push away anxiety. We're not trying to get rid of depression. We're not trying to get rid of any feelings. We're completely accepting of whatever our experience is. But we're behaving in a committed way according to our values and not according to our feelings, right? So it's kind of, it is
like
very
that.
huge. Yeah. So if you think about it, most of us are sort of at the mercy of our feelings. So like if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, you're mad, and somebody lets you in and you're happy. And, acceptance and commitment therapy would be like, I want to be a kind person and I want to behave in that way. And therefore, whether I'm mad or happy or whatever's happening in my day, this is how I'm going to behave. So I'm not trying not to have those feelings, but I'm also not behaving from those feelings. I'm behaving from a place of a very value-centered life. And so this framework can help many things, but I find that it really fits in well with the experience of chronic illness, both from a personal perspective and also from a couple's perspective.
Do you usually work with the patient themselves first and then bring in the dynamic of a relationship, whether it's a marriage or a boyfriend, girlfriend, or, a significant other?
It just depends. I mean, I do have a lot of individual chronic illness clients, and, I do believe that relationships can be changed one person at a time. So, I can work with them. I also have caregiver clients who come to me because they're burdened down with caregiving and all that. And then I can work with the couple and kind of weave in the individual work along with the couple's work. And so, we do all kinds of iteration. However it walks through my door, that's how I deal with it.
You'll deal with it. One client at a time. One patient at a time.
Exactly.
I know for myself, when I was first diagnosed with end-stage liver disease, I was going through my own personal trauma of accepting it, like you said. And I felt like I was being okay with how I was projecting myself. But I later learned, looking back now that I'm being diagnosed with MS and I'm dealing with it a little differently, we can project what we think we're responding to our spouse or how we're talking to our spouse. We don't feel like we're, acting out in any way. Do you find that pretty common with someone with a chronic illness?
Yeah. I feel like for couples, first of all, whatever your patterns were before one of you got sick, it's just going to be amplified now, And so, like, even if you had good communication before one of you got sick, your communication needs will skyrocket. So it's kind of like you can't just sort of interpret each other's behavior like maybe you used to be able to. You have to really talk about it all.
Right.
Because number one, everything has to be renegotiated now, like everything. I mean, most couples I know didn't even negotiate in the first place who was going to do what about that, around the house.
Right.
Or like who was going to do what in parenting or how intimacy was going to look or whatever. Like it just happened, But now that someone's sick, we really have to actually have a literal conversation about how those things are going to get renegotiated, because we can't just assume that somehow that's going to work out. So I think a lot of times before we're sick, we may be personally dealing with something or whatever, and that works fine. But then when we get sick, you have to actually have that conversation with your partner. You can't just like hope that you're dealing with it okay. It's like the conversation actually just needs to happen.
And you need to make sure that communication is equal on all levels, and that you're both able to listen I
Mhm.
found that to be the key, and not just be one that projects your thoughts and your frustrations. You have to be able to know what your caregiver is going through as well, and
Yeah.
accept that if they're frustrated at you one day, it's not because they don't love you or that you're a burden. It's just,
Yeah.
they have
It's
their own
frustrating.
feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like to sort of externalize the illness. It's almost like the illness is like a third party in your relationship now, right? So
Right.
it's like someone else has entered your relationship. It's called Ehlers-Danlos or MS or whatever it is. And you're not upset at each other. It's like the
Uh-huh.
two of you are upset at this thing that has entered your relationship without your consent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in that way, it can sort of help break through that feeling of like, oh, they're mad at me, or like a caregiver often feels too guilty to express how they feel,
Yep.
because how could I be having problems when it's my partner is the ones who's sick? But
Suffering. Yeah.
if the problem is the illness, then you can express that because you're not speaking against your partner, you're speaking against the
Against the
illness,
illness.
right? So I
I like
find that
that.
to be a very helpful kind of model of externalizing it so that it takes the pressure off of each other.
And you're
Yeah.
not going at it. What type of therapy do you look for a patient with chronic illness? Is there like a certain, how you Google? I know there's going to be listeners wanting to get help or start seeking help.
Yeah.
What do they look for in a therapist?
So, first of all, this is a growing field. In fact, a friend of mine who runs this website that I'm going to give you in a second, she always says like chronic illness isn't even a niche anymore. It's not even a specialty. Like every therapist needs to know what they're doing
Yeah.
with chronic illness because we have so many people with at least one chronic condition, right? Unfortunately, not every therapist is on board with that yet, but we're trying to get there. So there is a website called chronicillnesstherapists.com. And if you go /directory, so chronicillnesstherapists.com/directory, they're actually making a directory of therapists with a chronic illness specialty.
Beautiful.
So for example, my group, there's 7 of us, we work in the state of California, but we can only work in the state of California. So if you're not in California, you can go on that directory, filter it for your state, and you should be able to find someone who can work with that. But even if you can't find anyone on that directory, what I would say is, first of all, if you're going as a couple, and I say this for all couples therapy, not just chronic illness related, you can ask a couple questions. One is, what percentage of your caseload is couples? And that, it should be about 50%. At least you want someone who does a lot of couples therapy. And the second question is, what kind of special training do you have in couples therapy? And it doesn't matter if you understand anything they say after that. They just should have some special training, right? Yes. And so those would be also good questions for a chronic illness therapy is like, what percentage of your caseload do you work with that has chronic illness? In other words, like, are you versed in working with this particular kind of client? And then have you had any special training in chronic illness or any special, certifications or anything like that? So they may not have, because there's not a lot of great training out there yet, but like I can say I've gone to a chronic illness therapist conference. I, collaborate with a lot of chronic illness therapists. I've written a book on chronic. So you want someone who has an answer for that question, just some kind of an
And
answer
not
for that
going,
question. Yeah. Like, I don't know. It should be the same as all kind of other therapy. Not really,
It's just therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What has been the biggest obstacle that you've found with couples coming to you, as far as is it just not understanding each other, not understanding the illness? I'm going to put myself out there again. I know for me personally, I didn't feel like, because I don't look sick,
Uh-huh.
I don't feel that at times, I mean, I love my husband and all that. I don't feel at times he fully understands.
Yes. Yeah. I would say that's a big one. Like one of the things that I work with on couples a lot at the beginning is let's just make an agreement to believe your partner's experience, whatever it is that they say, because you're not in someone else's body. No one's trying to fake anything. We're just reporting our experience, but almost, well, I don't know if I would say almost all, but a lot of chronic illness is invisible. No one can see joint pain, chronic pain, fatigue, all of those things that come with chronic illness. And so, but I will say to the caregiver, but like, you've been sick. I mean, everyone's been sick. Like, you
Everybody's been sick.
understand the experience of not feeling well. So let's just make an agreement as a baseline agreement point that we are going to believe each other's experience. And then I try to get a lot more communication in place and doable communication. So like, you can't wait when you have chronic illness until something comes up and then have a big, huge argument because you don't have the spoons for that. You don't have the emotional
energy.
or the physical energy to do that. So we need to set up like 20 minutes a day to like really kind of go over what you need, what's one thing your partner can do for you, what's one thing you're concerned about, something like that. But regular daily communication so that you can keep up on things instead of waiting until you're already mad about something. That is not going to work for you when you're chronically ill. Yeah. And then I think when you overlay the grieving process, you can sort of understand that like one of you might be depressed while the other one of you is in the bargaining phase and is really just spinning around searching for cures or treatments or whatever. And that's okay. You're just in different areas, but communication needs to happen around that, or one of you might be just super angry. There's so much to be angry about. And yet the other person might be in an acceptance place where they're just like, hey, it is what it is right now. And the other person's super angry, so just understanding that we're going to be in different places at different times. That's okay. There just needs to be some communication around there. And then a lot of renegotiating everything because intimacy is going to look different. Household stuff is going to look different. Parenting is going to look different. Probably wage earning may look different. Lots of things like that. So there's we also want to put in a system of negotiation so that there's some productive negotiating and conflict going on where you're actually solving problems instead of just getting mad and acting out and not really solving anything.
And then not coming together to fight this battle together.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I have actually a question that I know I will have a listener ask me, and it's only because I've had it myself. What would you give a patient that's newly diagnosed as far as some tools to sit down? What is a good conversation starter?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good conversation starter would just be to sort of like state the reality of like, look, everything has now changed. Like whatever we thought was happening is now different. And we are going to have competing needs and a lot of things are going to change. So how would you like to address the changes that are coming up? Like, what is the best way for you to talk about some of the things that are happening so that we're being proactive in solving these problems instead of just kind of like catching the balls as they come. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think like curiosity can take you so far, like if you just say to your partner, like, I'm really curious about how this is landing for you. This is something that's happening to me, but how is it landing for you? Like, what are you feeling? How would you like to approach the challenges that are coming down the pike? Like, invite your partner. Like very few people will come at you if you're offering an invitation, instead of like, you're not listening. You don't know what it's like to be me. You know what I mean? Like the person only has they're going to back up if you do that. Right. But if you say like, I'm inviting you to tell me like, what's this like for you? What's your experience like? Very few people are going to be combative. If you're coming at them with like curiosity and true care about what they're experiencing. And then if you give them a chance to say that, a lot of times it'll come back to like, well, what's it like for you? Now you're having a conversation.
Then it opens the book.
Yes.
Instead of assuming, and I do have a lot of people that come on our chronic page for support that they assume. They come on and they're assuming their spouse feels this way because of what's happening instead of sitting down and having this conversation. So stop assuming and start communicating.
Yeah. Like especially, and this is very stereotypical, I understand that, but like if the woman is sick, a lot of men deal with their grief by throwing themselves into work, or they think like, this is going to cost a lot, so I'm going to work more. You know what I mean? And
Yep,
they're doing
yep,
that from a very loving place, but it can feel very isolating.
yep,
So like you're saying, if you're not checking out your assumptions, you may attribute to your partner like a motivation that actually isn't the case. But,
right,
so being curious about like, what are your fears? Like, what are you afraid is going to happen?
right. And
Like,
put your needs out there.
yeah,
I need you here instead of
uh-huh,
working 60
yeah,
hours a week. I would rather you just do normal and I need you type of
absolutely.
conversations.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
You wrote a book, Thriving in a Relationship When You Have a Chronic Illness. Can you share a little bit about that and where they
Yeah.
can find it?
Yeah. So what I did with the book was I paired the grieving stages, and I would just like to briefly say, like, I think all of us understand there's nothing organized about grief. Like
Right.
these
Nope.
are not stages that are like something like,
Oh,
but
you jump from 1 to 4. Yeah.
yeah. But the reason why I like the stages of grief is they do represent emotional experiences that I think everyone who's grieving will be like, yep, anger, yep, bargaining, yep, depression. Like, yeah, we all get that. So I paired them. There's 6 stages of grief. And ironically, there's 6 core skills in ACT therapy. And so what I
Very
did was
good.
I kind of paired them together. So for each stage of grief, I gave you a skill. And then the way that it's kind of supposed to work once you familiarize yourself with it is you can mix and match, right? So you can be like, I'm feeling this kind of emotional experience, and this core skill is something I think would be helpful for me. So I paired them all kind of together, and then I spoke to what the well partner might be feeling in that
Oh,
stage
good. I
and
was
what they
just going
might
to
need.
ask.
And I spoke to what the sick partner might need. So if you are one or the other and your partner's not on board, you can read it alone. And it'll just develop empathy for like what your partner's experience might be. Or you can read it together and you can both kind of get your pieces out of it.
Interact
So
throughout
yeah,
it or
yeah,
highlight it and then give
yeah,
it to your partner and then he
totally.
highlight it and give it back. So I
Absolutely.
love
Yeah.
that. Where can we find this book at?
So it's on Amazon or like any place that you get your books. I tend to like to get them from independent bookstores, but I also have a website, Lisa Gray Author, and both of my books are available on that page. My first book is just about basic conflict skills, and then my second book is this one. So it's a good pair just if you
Yep.
need background conflict skills as well. So
Yep.
both of my books are on my Lisa Gray author page, and then I'm on Instagram, Lisa Gray MFT. You can find me there, and I talk about chronic illness on there a lot as well. So yeah.
This has been so helpful. I know just for myself, just hearing you and my listeners, she has those 2 books. We all have conflict in our relationships at some point. I and then you add a chronic illness to it, it's only compounding what's already kind of struggling with. So I highly recommend getting both these books and, just educating yourself, educating your partner. What would you say if you have a client that's partner is not willing to accept?
Mm,
I'm going
yeah.
to throw that out there.
I think it depends. I mean, there is a spectrum of non-acceptance. So for some folks with chronic illness who have a partner who is not accepting their experience, there is a line where that becomes abusive in the sense of like neglect or just truly abusive behavior. And that's unacceptable. And you have to find a way to get support and get out
Okay.
of that situation if that's the case. So there is a
Beautiful.
line to be crossed. There's a lot of other relationships where it's just like, you're just really not going to get the support you need from your
Hmm.
partner. You're not going to get the love and care from your partner that you really wish that you could get. And then you have more of a choice. Like you can exit that relationship, or I think, like in my first book, I talked about this, like it's hard to resist someone who's coming at you with kindness and curiosity about your experience and, kind of some of the things that we talked about.
Yep.
So I think like the first thing to try would be to like try to come at it from being the best partner you can be and really kind of trying to understand your partner's experience and seeing if that would help draw them closer to, at one point you loved each other and they loved you and
Exactly.
cared for you. And that's still in there somewhere, but there's
Mhm.
something that's blocking it and getting in the way. And then lastly, I would say, there are a lot of us out there who are doing couples therapy with chronically ill couples. And I think like resistant caregivers often feel like they're not going to get anything from that. And it is our job to kind of win that person over in the first session. And we're good at that. And so, if you can talk them at all into like, hey, I need you to get support too. I'll come with
Yep.
you. Let's
Yep.
like learn about this. No one gave us a manual for this,
Right. But
So
it's
like,
not all about the person with the chronic
yeah,
illness,
yeah,
that it's a dual situation.
yeah, yeah. So, I would just offer this hope that like, I do truly believe, and it's why I use the word in my book title, that you can still thrive as a couple, even though you have a chronic illness. And a lot of my chronic illness couples, ironically, find themselves in a closer, more intimate relationship than they were in before because they're communicating a lot more. They're assessing their values. They're really together on this. And so, like, find a therapist who can help you do that because it's
Help
totally
bring it.
possible. Yeah.
Very good. Now, do you do any work virtually with
Yeah.
patients if they were to
All
reach
of,
out to
yeah.
you?
In my practice, the 7 of us, we are telehealth only
Okay.
throughout the full state of California. And it's really a great modality for chronic illness clients because, half my clients are in bed in their pajamas when I'm talking to them. That is totally fine. You don't have to get in your car. You don't have to look nice. You can
Right.
just get the help you need.
You just
and
need help.
right there where you're at. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you say that you can only practice, only patients that live in California
Yeah.
can seek out. Okay. I just want to make that
For
clear.
me, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Now, some of the, like, if you have a PhD psychology, there's a psych compact where most PhD psychologists can see people in 22 states, I think.
Got you. Okay.
So this is getting better. For many years, we've been licensed only in our state. And because of the mental health crisis, there is a lot of work being done to expand that.
Expand it.
But at the
Good.
moment, a lot of therapists can only see people within their state. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on. And this is a sensitive topic, I think, for any couple
Yes.
going through chronic health issues. And I thank you for coming and putting a voice to that in a couple of books that I'm hinting to my listeners to check out.
Yeah.
Give it as a gift, buy 2, one for you, one for your husband, and just
Yes.
do it at your own pace. Don't force them.
Leave it on the coffee table.
Yeah. Eventually they're going to be bored some night or up at midnight and they'll grab it. So,
Yeah.
And just be patient is
Yeah.
my words of wisdom. So
Yes. Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you for
and
having me.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you so much. I know my listeners do too.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I think it's really important conversation. Yeah.